How's it going, everybody? Today we are taking a look at the Bible Project Classroom, which was just released, and I think that this is going to be a huge help for youth pastors in particular. That is my context. That is why this channel exists. It's an extension of the work that I do in youth ministry, and anytime I see a resource that I think youth pastors are going to benefit from, I want to share that with this community. So let's take a look at what the Bible Project is doing with their classroom. As I'm going through this class, this is just a mini class. They have bigger classes that are going to be longer. But as I went through this first little initial mini class, I immediately thought of the application for youth ministry, not only because it's online and not only because it's free, but because if you're not really familiar with what the Bible Project has been doing, they are particularly good at visually displaying the truths of the Bible. And so I'm cruising through this class and, I get that sense that if the Bible Project could help youth pastors communicate this way to students, to engage the imagination of young people, direct that towards the story of the Bible in a compelling way, I think it's going to be amazing. So these classes are taught by Tim Mackey. I think they might have other people teaching classes in the future, but here is one of the things that struck me was as they're going through this class on Eden, and they're looking at the different patterns and the different ways that these kind of key words and ideas are linked in other places of Scripture. Tim starts drawing this diagram, and I don't know if this is really his, it's not really his drawing, but they make it look like it is, and either he's really good at drawing straight lines, or somebody's done some work on the graphic, which is great. But I look at this and I'm like, okay, anytime that you can boil your ideas down into a simple kind of image, if it can fit on a napkin, then you're on to something. And so he's looking at Eden and how there's this three-tiered kind of sacred space when it comes to humanity communing with God and how we go into the presence of God. He'll later compare this to the temple and look at the same type of pattern. And again, I don't necessarily want to review this particular class. If you're part of the youth ministry, etc. Discord server, that's what I was talking about. I was saying we could do these classes together because I do think, particularly for youth pastors, one thing that would be great for the classroom is some kind of cohort, some kind of group that you can do this together and get some dialogue and do some of that stuff. So again, this is kind of beta. I don't know if that's in their plans, but anybody that's a part of the youth ministry, etc. Discord server, we could be doing that. If you wanted to, we could get together on like a Friday and do a Bible nerd class. But so I start seeing these drawings, and I'm thinking about what the Bible Project, like I said, is really good at, and that is displaying the truths of the Bible in a way that is compelling to the imagination. Because I think of the world that students are in, and we need this. We need to connect the stories that are in the Bible that are compelling, that speak powerfully into the issues that we all have in humanity. But I think particularly to young people who are exploring the world around them and trying to make sense of it. Well, if we're just going to our Bible study and we're just kind of droning on through the pages of this book, if it's just words that are just printed in black ink on a white piece of paper, it's not compelling enough to hold the attention of young people who spend hours and hours and hours a day. I mean, just accessing content that is very visually stimulating, stimulates the imagination. And so then we go to Bible study and it's just like, man, we're going to check out. If it's not compelling on a level that engages the imagination, then we've lost our young people. And so this is great. If the Bible Project Classroom can in any way help youth pastors to pull those stories out of Scripture and to display those stories and tell those stories and teach those stories to students, I think that we are onto something, because story communicates far more. Poetry can communicate far more than just propositional theology. And that's what we need. We want to say everything we can about God, but in a short space that we have. And so what do we need? We need poetry, basically. We need to be able to display and engage the imagination. Sorry, I'm kind of talking a lot, but that's why I'm going through this class and I'm just thinking, man, youth pastors, get into this, regardless of where you are with the Bible Project. I think checking this out would be awesome. So here's what I was talking about earlier. You see Eden here, you see the temple here, and you see this kind of three-tiered holy space. And again, how do we commune with God? How do we come into contact with God? Well, there's this kind of pattern outlaid in Scripture, and it's all, in fact, the temple is all kind of pointing back to Eden. There's all kinds of garden imagery in the temple. And so eventually this class, again, not doing a review of the class itself, but eventually points to Jesus, right? And points to how really Jesus is the way to bring humanity back into communion with God. And so he kind of points to that. But again, I don't want to get too much into the actual class. I want to get into the application of something like this for youth pastors. So getting to a place where we can display or tell the stories of Scripture, engage the imagination to young people who, again, are constantly stimulated through their eyes, that goes straight to the imagination. And yet when we do Bible study, it's pretty one-dimensional. So we need this. The other thing, and I know I already mentioned this, but anytime youth pastors can gain an education, can gain experience or be equipped in some area, we should do that. But of course, how are we going to access this? Well, this is online and it's free. So those are two things that youth pastors need, right? Is something that's easily accessible, but also doesn't cost a lot, because we all are short on time and we're broke. But the drawback might be that it's online and there's no community, right? There's no cohort. And as of right now, there's no credit. So you're not getting credit at some university. On their website, they did say they were working on that, but who knows? I think regardless of credits, again, it's free. So there you go. But what you would gain, I think, and again, I've only done a few of the classes, but what you would gain through going through a class like this would be hopefully the skill that the Bible Project has, which is visually displaying the truths of Scripture. And so, like I said, they eventually point to Jesus. There was one thing that I did want to say about just looking at Scripture as story, and I think that Tim has a really good perspective on this. Bear with me while I find it.
But when Jesus comes onto the scene, and the gospel authors who are presenting the importance of Jesus to us, they actually assume that you know all this. For example, you want to see?
Yeah, so that right there, understanding that the gospel authors are writing from a worldview, from a Hebrew worldview, and they're going to assume that you know some of these connection points: Eden, temple, the person of Jesus. And certainly as God has revealed Scripture, there is a timeless nature to it, because God revealed it knowing that we would be 2,000 years later reading it. But the worldview of the human author as well needs to be understood. And so just realizing that those authors wrote from a worldview and kind of assumed that worldview was known is really key. But I think oftentimes we miss these little points. And that's something that will help us picture what's going on in Scripture and use our imagination. And for those of you, I know that talking about the Bible as story and as narrative sometimes can be misunderstood. We're not saying that the Bible is made up stories. But it is story. God has chosen to reveal himself, the truths of who God is, in story, in narrative. It's true, but we also have to understand, again, that it's not propositional theology. So I'm going to find one more spot. Bear with me here.
So these authors are so creative. But notice all of it, this isn't just to be artsy for artsy's sake. They are actually trying to help us grasp the mystery of what happened in the life and the death and the resurrection of Jesus. And what it means for you to respond to this Jesus too. But they do it by means of hyperlinking these images from all different parts of the Bible.
So that, I think, is key. If we could learn as youth pastors how to do that better and how to show our students that the Bible is amazing and compelling, and the story that is written there is about the most important thing, which is how do we understand God? And that understanding that, we can make sense of the world around us. So the Bible Project Classroom, thank you for providing a resource. I'm not associated with the Bible Project at all, or giving any sort of full endorsement or anything like that. But man, a free resource like this for the whole church community, but in particular for youth pastors, I think is going to be key. One other thing is that, and I know maybe I'm weird, but you could do this class on 1.5 speed, maybe 1.2 if that's a little, and it cuts your time, down by, somebody can do the math for me here, but, so a 30-minute class, shrink that down. Some of these other classes are going to be bigger time commitments. If you've already gone to seminary, some of it's going to be just a refresher. But if you haven't, and I think the majority of youth pastors, last I checked, had not been into seminary but have a bachelor's degree, which is fine. This can be a great supplement to your education as you learn how to connect students to the gospel and to the real person, Jesus, right? And the way that story can help us do that. I think this is going to be key. So yeah, you can cut down your time there. Obviously, again, it's a free resource. You can do some reviews. I can show you that here in a second. But yeah, hopefully this is a good little nudge to say, look at the Bible Project Classroom. But more importantly, look into ways that you can improve the way you teach Scripture to students. So the other thing is you get, this is true of the mini class. I didn't find this to be true of the other classes. The other classes, you just kind of do a little you write up a little review, but I thought the way that they did the review for this mini class was really interesting. They have you going through all these different kind of like little short tests and things like that, just to kind of rehash the information that has come to you. And I thought that was really good. Again, I'm hoping to get a little bit more community, and if you are not a part of the youth ministry Discord server, but you are a youth pastor, it's a good place to find that community. Selfishly, I want that community, so that's why it exists. But so looking forward to seeing more of what the Bible Project does with this classroom, and maybe do more, maybe talk more about it in a later video. But I hope that's helpful.